Hi, I'm Senior Staff Archaeologist Sean Romo, and welcome back to Jamestown and another Dig Deeper episode. Today we're going to do something a little different. Over the past year, we've gotten a lot of questions, a lot of really great questions from you, our viewers, about Jamestown. Sometimes about specific things in earlier videos, and sometimes about just how we do what we do. So today we're going to take a minute and answer some of those questions. Now, they were too many for us to do all at once. So know that if your question doesn't get answered in this video, it's probably because it required a more in-depth answer, and we want to actually save those for upcoming videos. So you might get your question answered in a much more thorough way down the line. Well, without further ado, let's get to your questions and give you some answers.
All right, so we got some questions from Carson, Jennifer Berg, and CA about our overall archaeology process and how we choose a dig site. So first of all, how do we know where to start digging? Well, the entire island is on a 100-foot by 100-foot grid that was established by the National Park Service in the 1930s. And we actually break up those squares even further into 10-foot by 10-foot test units. So within each of those 10-foot by 10-foot test units, we're able to investigate the landscape and see how it's been used for the past several hundred years. So when it comes to choosing our test units, generally we have an idea of what we're going to find. Sometimes it's kind of like the game Battleship, where you just choose a square and then you can follow what you're finding. But nowadays we can, make educated guesses based on our earlier archaeology. So we have a whole bunch of maps that we can reference, as well as historic documents. Sometimes they can give us clues as to where to dig. More recently, we've also been implementing more ground-penetrating radar surveys. So this can also give us an idea of areas where there may be interesting features under the ground that we could investigate in the future. Now, digging in these test units also makes it easy for us to actually chase features and layers that we're interested in. So if we're finding a brick deposit, or for instance a series of post holes in one area that we want to chase, we can go ahead and open up another unit in the direction they're headed to uncover more of that possible structure. So that's actually what we've done in this area. We're chasing this series of possible mud stud post holes to uncover the footprint of the building itself. We also had a compliment on our profile walls. Thank you very much. We work very hard on ensuring that the walls of our test units stay nice and straight. That helps us to ensure that we're seeing each of those breaks in the layers, the strata we're digging through, very defined. You can see them very clearly. It also ensures that we are digging out as much of that 10-foot by 10-foot test unit as possible. As you dig down, you have a tendency to let the sides slope inward. So we ensure that we are cutting back the test unit walls as far as possible, keeping them very, very straight to get as much of that material out as there as possible. That gives us more artifacts to analyze, and also helps us to uncover further edges of features that could help us analyze the area further.
So we've had several questions asking about how artifacts get buried. These questions came from Steve M., Jennifer Berg, Kathleen Dougherty, and Vernon Land. So here at Jamestown, most artifacts are getting buried by human activity, whether that's historic human activity or activity throughout the hundreds of years that the island's been occupied. So in this unit, we have some really great examples of how artifacts get buried and kind of how this works. So we have a brick rubble layer here that's going to be related to either construction or deconstruction of a building. And underneath that, we have a previous ground surface. And so even the colonists are changing their landscape, probably raising up the land with this brick layer. But then you can see we have a significant amount of dirt on top of that. So we've got landscaping likely from the 1900s all the way up through 2005 with this clay layer. And all of these are also changing the landscape. The more modern ones are changing it so it's more accessible to visitors. But just like anything at your house that you do, making it more desirable for whoever's living there or using the land. Here at Jamestown, we do not get a natural deposition of soil. So we're not in a floodplain like somewhere near the Nile or the Mississippi that gets a natural deposit of soil. So everything is human activity, which is really important while we're excavating to keep that in mind. A similar question was asked of how deep do we dig, or how do we know when to stop digging? Here at Jamestown, there's a couple different reasons we might stop an excavation. One being is we have encountered archaeological features that we want to stop, potentially investigate later, or stop those excavations completely. Or we hit a natural ground surface. A lot of times here at Jamestown, it's going to be a clay subsoil layer. We may have features dug into that, such as post holes or cellars. However, as a whole, it is a natural ground surface that isn't going to have any archaeological material in it. So we've moved the locations here, and the other question that we had is how artifacts end up in features and how they just end up on the ground in general. So the first reason that artifacts are going to end up in features or on the ground is unintentional, right? Whether that's something falls out of your pocket, gets trampled into the ground surface, whether that's you're digging a post hole and you dig through all of the dirt underneath your feet, which probably also contains some artifacts in it, and then you put your post in, you put all of that dirt and all of those artifacts back into the hole. So those have some artifacts in there. And then I am kneeling here right beside one of our examples of a feature. As you can see, this has a lot of architectural debris with some mortar and some oyster shell in here. And so this is one of those examples of unintentional artifacts, right? It's very unlikely that somebody intentionally put these here. However, we do have features such as cellars or wells that become trash pits because they've stopped being used for their initial purpose and they now are a place where trash is being deposited. Speaking of wells, we had several questions from Mike Strong, Gary Cooper, and White Rabbit 1968 about how a Roman lock pistol got into one of our wells. And Dave Givens, our Director of Archaeology, is going to tell you about that.
Now, with objects like the pistol, how that got in the well is supposition, and we just don't know. My feeling is that it may have been double loaded with 2 pieces of shot were recovered and found, and it may have become unusable and was just thrown away as trash. It could have fallen in when somebody was trying to extract something that had fallen in the well, or they just set it down on the side and it accidentally fell in. All of these are possibilities, but we do know that something like a pistol was extremely expensive and rare, so it's not likely that it could have been something, I think, that would be easily discarded for sure.
So we got a number of questions from Carson, California Dreamin', Prairie Dodgers, and others about the fragility of both features that we find, the artifacts that we're finding, and how we protect against damage, how we take care of these things. So one question was about how do you know where you can step? So we have a lot of very delicate features out at the site. Are you allowed to, step on them, or do you have to be very careful about where you're putting your feet? The short answer is yes, we do. There are a lot of places in the various units where you are told you cannot step there because the features are so ephemeral, right? One of them is right next to me over here, which is all these post holes that are very delicate, very hard to see. In the West Tower unit, we have some very delicate burnt plaster, and we are not allowed to go anywhere near those with our shoes. And just as a site etiquette thing in general, the shoes that all of us are required to wear can't have very heavy tread, just because when we're stepping around here anyway, even if we're not stepping on very delicate features, we still don't want big shoe prints all over the site. We're also not allowed to step on and around walls in case they collapse. So we also got a question about how we protect the site, not just from ourselves, but also things like rain, snow, and freeze thaw. So we have a number of different protections in place. One of them is the sandbag wall over here. Depending on the landscape around us, we'll have sandbag walls 2, 3, or sometimes even higher than that. And that's to prevent any water from running into the unit. We also pull these massive tarps over the entire area, cover them up, sandbag them down to make sure that any rainwater or snow or freezing that happens is not actually impacting the dirt. What we're dealing with, right, for our jobs is mostly dirt.
So when you have freeze thaws and any type of water getting in the unit, you are looking at the potential destruction of that information forever. So we take a lot of precautions to make sure that water and things like that do not get in the unit and affect all of our artifacts and our dirt. So we also got some questions about how we protect our artifacts specifically. So for most artifacts that come out of the ground, these are already pretty stable. For the most part, they have survived 400 plus years in the ground, and they can survive in these paper bags before we take them into the lab for a little bit longer. But if we do have very small, very delicate artifacts, we'll actually put those inside of a little medicine bottle to make sure that they're not getting crushed by larger artifacts. And if we have something that's very delicate that needs to be removed and taken to the lab immediately, then that's exactly what we'll do. Those are objects that are iron, right, that needs to be conserved relatively quickly before it dries out and starts to impact the artifact, or other just very delicate things like plasters, and things that will disintegrate if they are crushed, right, or left out in the air, exposed to the air for very long.
So we've gotten some really nice comments from you guys on our videos, and we just want you to know we do actually read them and your questions, and we're really appreciative of you engaging with us when we make these.
Yeah, Sean, I want to really back that up. We really take your comments to heart. They're very important to us. We've made a decision not to respond on YouTube, but instead to respond by giving you a better, accurate information on these videos. Part of what you're seeing, though, is because of our commitment to being both as accurate as we can and as rapid as we can, it really takes a team effort, and that team effort, Sean is obviously involved in producing and directing, as is Mariana Hartley, as is Dave Givens, our Director of Archaeology, Michael Lavin, our Director of Collections. So it's really a team effort, and for that, we really do appreciate your comments and hope you continue to give us feedback, because we're always looking to make these better.
And I want to point out, too, that Chuck here actually is the one who puts the videos together. He's our videographer, so he does the filming and he does the editing. So the very nice videos, the professional work that you see out there, that's a lot of Chuck's effort. And we're really appreciative to have him working on these. And I also want to take a minute just to shout out two of our most frequent commenters, Mary G. and White Rabbit 1968. I think you guys have commented on all or nearly all of our videos, at least in this last batch. So we do notice when you guys are out there. And a lot of the questions we've answered, both in this video and we're going to tackle in the next one, have been from frequent posters. So thanks again. So we got a lot of questions since the last time we did one of these videos. And in fact, it was too many to fit into one response video. So we split it into two, just like we did before. So if you didn't see your question answered this week, then tune into our next video where we're going to tackle a few more. And if you still didn't get your question answered, just know that something's going to be coming up that's going to go into that with much more depth. We picked out a few comments and questions that we really wanted to explore in greater detail.
Yeah.
So those are going to be their own videos. So don't worry, if you didn't see your question answered now, it's coming up for sure.
Thank you so much for taking the time to view us. We'll keep coming at you.
And come see us on the site if you ever get a chance.